Welcome to the 7th session of Tanakh and the Halakhic mindset, part of the rabbinical learning program. In the previous class, we discussed the korbanot, the sacrifices, and in general, the beginning of the book of Vayikra, and we've seen how the korbanot was referred to throughout Tanakh. Today, we will continue to briefly review some of the main topics in the book of Vayikra. In chapter 10, we read about the tragic death of the sons of Aaron when they brought incense when they were not instructed to do so. This is a story which had all the commentators perplexed, and what exactly was the reason for that? It seems cruel, it seems unfair. Definitely was difficult for Aaron. There's a beautiful poem read in the Iraqi tradition, She'aiba begaron be'emod v'tzo'ek berov garon that is being read in the synagogue just before we read it in the Torah. It's very emotional, very, very hard to think of, especially if one knows bereaved parents. In any case, if we want to look at it from the point of view of the Torah, we have to know that in the book of Midbar, the story of Nadav and Avihu features prominently, and every time there's a census, they are mentioned, even though they're dead already, they're mentioned by name, and the reason for their demise is also mentioned. So it seems like it's really important to know that they died because they brought Eshzara. Part of the reason for that could be, and that we'll see more in detail in the book of Midbar, is the Torah tries to convey the message of the importance of clear hierarchies and boundaries, responsibilities, especially when we talk about certain roles and positions that require preparation and qualification. So even though this seems to us cruel that people who serve in the temple would be punished in that manner, but when we think of organizations such as hospitals or the army or the government, the educational system, we understand that a person who's going to be a teacher or a doctor or an engineer or a soldier have to have proper qualification. Anyone who breaches the boundaries and says, okay, it's open for all, could cause damage to society in general. So in that context, and that's what we see in Bamidbar, it is important. So the Torah teaches us the importance of hierarchy and boundaries and responsibility. Also, the following paragraph, verses 8 to 11, speaks about the prohibition to serve in the temple while drunk, and that conveys the message that the path to spiritual growth should not pass through artificial elements, definitely not through substance abuse, as unfortunately we see today in yeshivot and other religious circles where people would get drunk on Simchat Torah, on Purim, and dance and rejoice. It's beautiful, but it should not be achieved through alcohol. If one cannot be happy in his or her Judaism without alcohol, then something is missing, and I think that is probably the message that is conveyed in this paragraph. Following that, we read the list of the non-kosher animals. There are many different explanations why the Torah wants us to eat kosher. I will just sum it up here briefly, because the kashrut system really got out of hand. The way we are obsessed today with every detail, everything has to be supervised, everything has to be labeled. This is a system and a phenomenon which cause division and even animosity. People will not visit each other, will not eat by each other. People are filled with the anxieties of maybe they ate the wrong thing, and we really have to get into it more in detail as when we will study the Halakhic literature. But for now, we'll say that in the Torah, the concept of kashrut is quite limited. That we have the list of the non-kosher animals, fish, bugs, and other and birds, and we have the prohibition against the mixing meat and dairy. Other than that, there's almost no kosher requirements in the Torah except for the kosher slaughtering, kasher tziviticha, tizbah kasher tziviticha, which we'll see later, and certain rules that pertain to the to fruits and vegetables, more to fruits, the way they grow for the first 3 years, etc. But really, we don't have this extensive system of kashrut as we find today. And in some of my articles, I brought up the notion that this has a lot to do with the taboos that especially when we talk about something that is digested by our body, something that we bring into our own body, to think that maybe it's not kosher causes a person to be appalled, because then we have a feeling of being contaminated and being even invaded in a certain way. So it's easy to take kashrut to an extreme, to just keep it in the within the boundaries of the Torah and speak about the general concept of why we eat kosher. I would say that in this list, I think one of the key elements is sustainability. The animals, sustainability and ecology. The Torah does not want us to eat animals that contribute to the health and proper maintenance of the ecological system. That's why we're not allowed to eat the birds of prey, because they are the sanitation core of nature. They take care of carcasses and other elements that could cause diseases. We'll see later that the two types of animal, a kosher animal that we should not eat, are nevela utrefa, which according to the pshat of the Torah mean nevela, an animal that died a natural death because of disease or old age, terefa, an animal that was killed by a predator. And as we know today, both types of animals are not healthy for consumption. An animal which died because of a disease might carry the pathogens, could cause problems. You all remember very well what happened with the mad cow disease that started because of that. And an animal which was killed by predators could also carry some diseases that mutated from the predator to the animal, and then mutate in the humans as well. So the Torah cares about the ecological system. That could be the reason why the camel, the hare, the rabbit, and the pig are not to be consumed. The camel, because it is too important to the economy. It's an animal. It's a work animal that should not be consumed. And the pig, on the other hand, is a non-sustainable animal. It does not work. It does not provide anything except for meat when it's slaughtered. So the Torah rejects it. Of course, there's also the image of later on acquired by our cultural contact with Greeks and Romans and Christians, that for them that was the main staple. But in the Torah, that could be the reason why we do not consume these animals. Another main reason in the for the laws of kashrut could be the idea of restraint and delayed gratification. That once we know that there are certain things that we cannot eat, we learn also to delay our gratification. This is an extremely important character trait. There's a famous test called the marshmallow test, which you could search online, watch a video. It seems just like a hilarious video where children are offered the marshmallow, and they're being told that if they could wait for 5 minutes, they'll get another marshmallow. And then the tester leaves the room, and the child is left with the marshmallow. They look at it, they turn it around, they really want to eat it. Some kids cannot hold themselves, and they eat the marshmallow before the time is up, and some kids can control and wait for the second marshmallow. But the important part of that experiment is not what happens within those 5 minutes in the room, but rather what happens later. The researchers followed the kids, and they found out that those kids who were able to delay gratification had better grades, better jobs, more stable family life, and that was clearly tied to their ability to delay gratification, which conveys the ability to have to plan long-term planning and not fall for the temptation of the moment. And the good news is that this character trait is can be acquired, and it's acquired through training. But the training should be done with subtlety and with understanding. So when parents tell the child, you cannot eat this because it's not kosher, you cannot eat this because if you keep meat and dairy and you want to wait 3 or 6 hours, say we don't eat it right now, you don't have to impose 3 or 6 hours on the child. You could say, after 5 minutes, okay, time is up. You've waited for an hour, and then gradually prepare the child for that. But the general idea is that the ability to restrain ourselves and not to take everything that we have in front of us right away, to bypass, to overcome immediate instant gratification, and to delay it, can really build character and prepare us for greater challenges in life. Another interesting element here in the kashrut list is the different types of locust. Arbe, salam, hargol, hagav. Unlike all other bugs, those are ones that are kosher and can be consumed, and that's part of the system that, like I mentioned before, considers the ecology and the economy. The only time when people would have enough locust to sustain themselves is when there is a plague of locust and the crops were destroyed. So the Torah, I would say, suspends the ban against eating bugs, and says those types of bugs you can eat because that right now is your only food. And with that comes also the understanding that within the list of kosher animals and non-kosher animals, there could be some that have a solid reason for their consumption, why you should eat these and not these, and others that could be just arbitrary, that are included in the list just to train us to observe, to obey certain laws. That ties into what I said previously about the whole system of the Ben Adam Lamakom, of the mitzvot between us and God, that are meant to help us, to train us into a certain system of obedience, eventually for our own benefit, for the greater good. The following paragraph in chapter 12 deals with nida. It is important to mention here. Sorry, it's not about nida. It's about the isha ki tazriya, a woman who gives birth. This is something that later on was misunderstood not misunderstood, taken out of context in the practice. And instead of giving a woman 40 days or 80 days after birth of tahara, of purity, they became restricted days. But we'll deal with this later on when we get to the laws of nida. Then we have the discussion of tzarat, which is translated as leprosy, but probably is not, because leprosy is, with all the details, the way it is understood today, is not the tzarat of the Torah. It could be a theological explanation here, which I'm not going to get into, as this is in our time and day has no practical application. We do come here now to the issue of nida, and the important thing here is when we look at the Torah, that we took the laws of nida out of proportion, and there are different voices in the world of halakha today regarding that. According to the Torah, the time of separation of nida is 7 days only, and the strict requirements to wait 7 days after purification for the zav and zava are meant for people with sexually transmitted diseases such as gonorrhea and syphilis. And the Torah wanted people who had those diseases to first be quarantined, to keep away from other people. And then, after they were healed, they were still not allowed to come back into the camp and to assume normal life, but rather were required to wait 7 days to see if that healing or that recovery is full and comprehensive, or it was just a random day where they did not have emission. So, after that, after 7 days passed, then they could go. Then they could go to the mikveh, and purify themselves and come back to the temple. It's also interesting to know that when the Torah speaks of the nidah, of a regular nidah, not sexually transmitted disease, the Torah does not mention the need to go to the mikveh. That is something that we will discuss later on when we get to Halakhic literature. But that what the implication of the pasuk is that if a man and a woman have relations while she is nidah, then they are considered impure. What is the meaning of this impurity? Is that they cannot go to the temple. Does it? We'll see, as I said later on when we discuss rabbinic literature, we see whether all agree on that concept or not. But as today, halakha is decided that relationships during nidah are forbidden. One possibility to see that as since a lot of people, and women specifically, are very upset by the terminology of tum'ah, that why should be a woman considered impure for a natural process that repeats itself. I think one of the answers to that, maybe the most important thing, is that this is a way for a woman to protect herself. We have evidence from medieval Europe that there were women who took upon themselves a vow of celibacy after they were married, after they had children, just so they will be able to keep their husbands away from them. Their husbands were aggressive or violent, but they would obey the religious laws. Again, this fits the idea that was mentioned before, that where men or humans cannot control themselves because of moral values and ethics, they are able to control themselves when they believe that there is a religious system in place. So this could be one explanation. There are also other explanations that a certain period of separation helps maintain romance and connection. This is of course true as well. But I think that the main reason here is to give a tool to women to protect their privacy and to keep their husbands or other men away from them. And we'll get more into these laws as we go through rabbinic literature, of course. In chapter 17, we read about the prohibition of eating blood. Ish ish mibet Israel u'minager agar betocham asher yochal kol dam v'natati fanai b'nefesh ha'ochelet et adam. This is considered a severe transgression to eat blood. The way to understand this, I believe, is, as I mentioned before, the concept of ecology and the sustainability of the kashrut system is that, according to some thinkers, and I happen to agree with that, the Torah is not in favor of meat consumption, and that could have been the state before the flood. But then later on, the Torah, or God, make this compromise with humanity and allows us to eat meat. So it is not the ideal way of life, consuming meat. But if we already consume meat, we have to be considerate. We have to be sensitive. So one of the ways that we show sensitivity is not to cook a kid in its mother's milk, which of course applies to all mammals and all milk, not necessarily of the mother and the child, but the message there is that to take an animal and slaughter it and cook it with the same liquid that sustains its life and shows the connection of a mother to a child is extremely cruel. In the same sense, spilling the blood on the ground is an act that shows carelessness. Maybe it applies only to wild animals, because the domestic animals are sort of our property and we're allowed to slaughter them when we need. But when we venture into nature and we kill wild animals or birds, we have transgressed our territory. Therefore, this blood spilling is tantamount to murder. And the idea of covering the blood in Tanakh is covering for murder. So usually one is not supposed to do that, like the Navi says, Eretz, Eretz, al techasi damam, O earth, do not cover the blood of those who were murdered. Or in the famous story of Cain and Hevel, God tells Cain, I can hear the blood of your brother crying out to me from the earth. But here the Torah says you should cover the blood, as if saying what you did was inappropriate, but now that you did it, cover the blood. So that, I think, is part of the way the Torah teaches us sensitivity. And after that we have the halachot of nevela utrefa. Chapter 18 Chapter 18 is read on Yom Kippur in the afternoon. It is the list of the arayot, the forbidden sexual relationships. It starts with a title of כמעשה ארץ מצרים אשר ישבתם בה לא תעשו וכמעשה ארץ כנען אשר אני מביא אתכם שמה לא תעשו ובחוקותיהם לא תלכו. Do not follow the path, the ways of Egypt where you used to live, nor the one of Canaan where you're going to. ושמרתם את חוקותיי ואת משפטיי אשר יעשה אותם האדם וחי בהם אני אדוני. Rather, you should follow the mitzvot as I have commanded you, and you would live through them. I am Hashem. Ish ish el kol she'er b'saro lo tikrevu legalot erva, ani Adonai. The first prohibition of the general rule of do not come close to your relatives to uncover their nakedness is sealed with the statement Ani Adonai, I am Hashem. For two reasons. It could be many reasons, but at least two that I will mention here. One is that those type of actions are usually done in secrecy. So Ani Hashem says, I know what is going on everywhere. This is the idea of the omniscient God that is the glue that keeps society together, including when we talk about transgressions that otherwise would be carried out in secrecy. The other idea is that this is part of the system of the Torah to augment the idea of loving relationships. To have this kind of incestuous relationship do not stem from love. It is unnatural. It is forbidden in all societies. It is taboo, and modern science probably have a way to prove why is it a taboo, and that is that humans have the ability to smell DNA. And it's very sort of subconscious ability to smell that, and that is the reason when people say, I don't know what they found in each other. Could be that they smell the DNA, that they felt the genetic compatibility. But when the DNA is too close to between two people, then there'll be a rejection. So really, all the laws of arayot here are laws that were naturally kept in most societies, except for Eretz Mitzrayim, where a brother and sister would be married to each other in the royal family to make sure that the kingdom remains with the family, and that's probably why the Torah elaborates on the prohibition of incestuous relationship with the sister. The one sister, whether she's the daughter only of the father or of only the mother, whether she's part of the household or not, should not be part of the matrimonial system. They're being with them is considered incest. The same with children, parents, and parents through marriage, stepmother and stepfather. The interesting thing here is, in this list, is that we have the list of arayot has a certain formula. Do not uncover the erva of this and that. Do not uncover the erva of this and that relationship. But then it changes when it goes ve'isha lahotah lo tikach litzror legalot ervata alea b'haya. It doesn't say ahot ishtecha, your wife's sister, but rather do not take a wife to her sister or on her sister. So one possibility to explain that, which is the peshat, not how the rabbis, not how the tradition explain that, but one possibility to see that, which I heard from Rabbi Yitzhak Sassoon, is that Isha lahotah has to be understood the way the Torah speaks of objects, such in the building of the Mishkan, that we have to connect the ri'ot, the fabrics, Isha el ahotah, a woman to her sister. We speak about inanimate objects as a woman and her sister. If that is the case, then what the Torah tells us here is a prohibition against bigamy. Do not take a woman to her sister, not necessarily her sister, but any other woman is considered her sister. And why is that not appropriate? Because what you do here, you uncover her nakedness. And here it's not a question of incest, but rather in the sense of shame and disgrace that that one is not satisfied with the relationship he has with his wife, and he takes another wife. That could be challenged by the fact that we do find bigamy and even polygamy in the Torah, but if we take into account the idea that there are certain practices in society that the Torah knows that will not be easily abolished, and the way to address them is more subtle, more circumspect, then this is what we have here. On one hand, the Torah writes, you should not marry a woman on her sister, and that also explains why the prohibition is only behaya, when she's alive. If the first woman passed away, then one can marry another woman, but to do it simultaneously is inappropriate. So on one hand, the Torah would write this prohibition maybe in a more subtle and secretive way. On the other hand, in all the stories, in the narrative part of the Torah, when we look at couples who had more, where there was bigamy or polygamy, they all were tragic. In the book of Bereshit, we have Lamech with his two children, with his two wives, Ada and Tzila, and we know that this relationship was tumultuous. He was a tyrant. Maybe he felt that he's entitled to be violent and aggressive because he has two wives, or maybe it's the other way around. Abraham had three wives, Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah. His children were divided or dispersed. Hagar and Sarah were fighting. That did not end well. Yaakov had four wives, Rachel, Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah, and this story did not end well with the brothers, the siblings, fighting between themselves, vying for their father's love. Later on, we find Elkanah with two wives, Hannah and Penina, also did not end well. Hannah and Penina are fighting. Penina makes Hannah upset. If we continue in Tanakh, we find the King David with 18 wives. His children fight among themselves. There's rape, there's murder, there's conspiracy, and finally Shlomo with 1,000 wives, even though the number is probably exaggerated. But the Navi says, "Le'ed ziknato nashav hitu et levavo." At his old age, his wives drove him away from the path of Hashem. So it's consistent across the Torah and Tanakh that bigamy and polygamy are not ideal, and that's why we should not be surprised that at the turn of the millennium, Rabbeinu Gershom Moragola instituted that ban against bigamy. And even in the Sephardic communities where such a ban was not accepted, one has to remember that a man was not allowed to marry a second wife without the consent of the first wife, and usually that was done only when the first wife was barren and gave her consent to the husband to marry a second wife, or when it was necessary to take care of the children when the first wife was ill. So that is a proof that people understood the spirit of the Torah here, even though it's not what the oral law interpreted in the pasuk V'isha la'achota lo tikach. Then, from those incestuous relationships that speak of blood relations, we move to general prohibitions. Elisha benidat tumata lo tikrav legalot ervata, the prohibition to be with the nida. Elesh tamitecha lo titen shechovtecha lezar aletom haba, to not have to have relation with the married woman. ומזרעך לא תיתן להעביר למולך ולא תחלל את שם אלוהיך אני אדוני, and you shall not let your children be passed in front of the molech, because this is a blasphemy. You are desecrating Hashem's name. It's an important statement that we'll get back to when we study Torah Shebe'al Peh, because this seems to seal the list of incestuous relationships and to transport us into the realm of Avodah Zarah. Up until here, we spoke about relationships within the family, with relatives, or or through marriage. And here the Torah speaks about sacrifices one's children to the Molech, which is a type of Avodah Zarah, of paganism. This is important because the following pasuk speaks about what we think is homosexuality. It says, "Ve'et zachar lo tishkav mishkevei isha." You shall not sleep with the men the way you sleep with the woman. It is an abomination. It's a painful issue today in the Orthodox community. The way the LGBT community is treated, and there are a couple of things that I could say here. One is that it is proven today, and it was known, that sexual orientation is not a choice, and therefore it is incumbent upon the Orthodox community to better understand and study the issue and to reconsider its position on that. And the process should be informed, should be thorough. The rabbis, the decisors, should sit with experts in the field, psychologists, social workers, health specialists, people of the LGBT community, to fully understand the problem and not make judgment based on hearsay or their understanding of reality without solid scientific facts. That is number one, and that is part of the obligation that we have, according to Maimonides, to accept the truth, no matter who the author is. So here we deal with the scientific truth, and we have to accept and deal with it and apply it in the appropriate manner. It is important to mention also that the only prohibition mentioned in the Torah is about sexual relationship between two men and not between two women, and that the later tendency to compile both and speak about the LGBT community as part of the Torah prohibition is mistaken. And it's only one place where this is where lesbianism is mentioned in the Talmud, and it's only mentioned by passing. It's also the only thing that the Talmud says that women who have homosexual relationships cannot marry Kohanim, which is questionable whether this is really what they want. And it was Maimonides who turned it into legislation and put that with homosexuality as part of the abominable acts forbidden because of Torah Mitzrayim, because they imitate the ways of Mitzrayim. That is another important comment to make here, as I said, that the list of incestuous relationship has been sealed and finished with the statement of Mizarachar Yitan La'avir Lamolech. Before that, with the prohibition against adultery, and the statement about Molech already takes us to the next level, or to a different topic, which is paganism, idolatry. In that context, we understand why the Torah says To'evahi. It's an abomination. This is a term that usually is reserved for Avodah Zarah. Maybe the Torah wants to indicate here that this prohibition has to do directly with idolatry, and therefore the question should be asked, and this is part of the process: what are we doing when it is not related to idolatry? And as we'll see soon, the concept of relationship, homosexual relationship, and prostitution at temples was prevalent at the time of the Torah. There are many indications peppered throughout the Nevi'im, and probably the previous pasuk is really tied to that. That's why it serves as the link between the prohibition on incestuous relationships and homosexuality, because homosexuality was part in the sense of the pagan culture, that was part of the prostitution that was practiced at the temple, where men and women would offer their services, and that is later on referred to as Kadesh and Kedesha in Sefer Devarim. And at least for the women who did that, one of the unwanted consequences was pregnancy, as also was a possible consequence from the previous Isuri mentioned in the list of Arayot. Unfortunately, what parents probably did, what mothers probably did, when they had this kind of unwanted pregnancy that was a result of either incestuous relationship or sacred prostitution at the temple, was to murder the babies, infanticide, and some of that did that with no concern or no rituals, but some of them turned it into sacred rituals and covered up for it by using the ritual of the molech, where people would sacrifice their children to the molech. And that is also something that we'll see that throughout Tanakh, almost everywhere, in every place where the concept of sacred prostitution at the temple is mentioned, the concept of murdering children is also mentioned. From later times, we know that in around monasteries and convents in Europe, there were many graves of infants that were killed because they were the product of forbidden relationship between nuns and monks. So this is not a completely far-fetched idea. In any case, this, as I said, is something that has to be studied very, very thoroughly, with all the resources of halakha, of history, of science, of understanding humanity at our disposal. But this is just a comment here to see it in the context of the pasuk. Why does it appear in this specific junction of the pesukim? From here, we segue to Parashat Kedushim, which is also the Parashat Kedushim is a central, you could say it's the central axis of Sefer Vayikra. It is sort of the second Decalogue. People refer to it as another set of the Ten Commandments. But like in other lists that I mentioned before in Parashat Mishpatim and elsewhere, there is no internal order, unlike the Ten Commandments, where we saw that there's a gradual development through the lists of on the two parts of the Ten Commandments, starting with the statement of divinity, going through the gifts that God gave humanity, the gift of being close to God, the gift of Shabbat, the gift of the ability to say and to know God's name, the gift of Shabbat, the gift of family, and then moving into the second part, which is the recognizing what other people have and not taking that which belongs to other. Do not take one's life, lo tirtzah. Do not take one's relationship, lo tinaf. Do not take one's property, lo tignov. Do not take one's entitlement to due process, lo ta'aneh bere'acha shaker. Do not bear false testimony. And finally, all that leads to the culmination of human achievement, which is lo tahmod. You will not covet, not as a commandment, but rather as a statement. If you follow through the process of appreciating what you have and not and respecting and acknowledging the property and territory of others, then you'll be at that level of lo tahmod that you will not have the need to covet because you will be satisfied with what you have. So this is in the Ten Commandments. Here, however, the Torah zigzags between prohibitions that have to do ben adam lamakom, ben adam lahavero. I will not go through all of them because this is a matter of detailed study that needs a broader frame to discuss. But the important thing here is that there's a clear sense of responsibility and of respect. Ish imo v'aviv tirau, respect your parents, respect the Shabbat. When you bring a sacrifice, you shall have it on that day and on the following. It should not linger for the third day. Maybe it's a message to not consume too much, to finish everything on the first day and then go back to one's regular routine. That speaks about the korban. And then the Torah presents the the laws of social justice, where the corner of the field, the leftover from the harvest, and a part of the vineyard are all left. This is an extremely important part of the Torah system of legal commitment, but also the social infrastructure. In a very interesting book called Give and Take by Adam Grant, the author explains that givers and those who give in a way that they educate other people to give can become the most successful people in society. And this is something that we could really see in the Jewish people. The idea of the ma'asot, or the corner of the field that we give to the poor, first teaches us humanity, teaches us sensitivity and understanding for the needs of others. But it's beneficial for us directly and indirectly. And one way that it's beneficial is that when one's efforts are geared only to satisfy his own needs, he could reach a plateau where he's satisfied. I have enough to sustain myself and my family. That's okay. But when one is driven by the desire to help others, he knows that always he could do more. For example, if a farmer produces a ton, or let's say he produces 1,000 pounds of wheat a year, and out of this he gives 100 pounds to the poor. But for him, 900 pounds is enough to survive, and he could live the same way next year, as long as he maintained that level of 1,000 pounds a year, of which he uses 900 and gives away 100. That'll be fine. But if it's driven by the cause of the Torah that give to the poor as much as you can, he thinks, okay, I wish I could give the poor 200 pounds. How am I going to give them 200 pounds if I make 2,000? And then he's driven to give more. And that, I think, is the one of the secrets of Jewish success, where philanthropists will give to hospitals, to educational institutions, because this is inculcated in us in such a deep way that we have to care about each other. Unfortunately, it has been limited only in some cases to the Jewish society because of a misunderstanding of the statement in the Talmud, "Aniyei Archa Kodmim," the poor people of your city have priority. It doesn't mean only the poor people of your community, of your gender, of your creed, but rather the people of your place. First help locally, and then help this spread globally. That ties directly to what we see we'll discuss in the next session, and that is the famous golden rule in in verse 18 of chapter 19. Love your brother as you love yourself. The idea of, I think, the core idea of that message is that you should love yourself. You should take care of yourself. You should be successful and prosperous, but then use that success and that prosperity to share your wealth and knowledge and abundance with others. That is, I think, the unique concept that Judaism offers in contrast with other religions. Some religions are focused on the success of the individual, a spiritual success, a nirvana, some kind of an enlightenment, but that person is detached and disconnected to the world. Others are concerned with grace, with the ability to achieve a life in the world to come. Judaism is obsessed with the success of the world in general, what we could call tikkun olam. But that success is achieved by first attending to the individual, listening to the needs of one's personality, developing it to the maximum, and then using that to build the world around us. With that, we conclude the 7th session. We are now at the middle of chapter 19 of Vayikra, and we'll continue, God willing, in the next session.